Alexander Wetzel. I'm from ISARA here in Lyon, and I'm also the coordinator of the Agroecology4EU project. That's why we'll start the moderation of this webinar. So we're very happy to have our second webinar today on mapping agroecology in different countries in Europe. And today it will be on the development of agroecology in Greece and in Italy. Next slide, please. So we have here's a number of registered people. So some people are still coming in. We will see how many we will be at the end. So there are many people who were interested and registered. So majority came from Italy, then Greece, of course, but also from Spain, Belgium, France, Turkey, and others. So about 16 countries or people from different countries registered. So we might see at least 60 of them, maybe. We will see. Next slide, please. And also, when you registered, it was asked, who are you? That we know a little bit what type of stakeholders we have participating. So there's a certain, well, 1/3, a little bit more than 1/3 is researchers, but we have also students, well, farmers, farm advisors, policymakers, and then a category which is other. Next, please. So the program of today, well, we will give a small introduction about the project and also a little bit about the methodology, but very quickly. And then we go immediately to the main results and outcome from the mapping of agroecology in Greece, and then followed up by Italy. And then having sufficient time to, well, exchange with the participants, to answer your questions, but also to debate maybe on agroecology in these two countries. Next, please. So Agroecology4EU is coordination and support action program, well, 3 years, and includes 12 partners from 10 European countries. And one of the main goals is really to build a European agroecological network to speed up well, the transition towards the more sustainable agriculture and then having more sustainable food systems. Next, please. There are key objectives, well, on the one side, to increase connections between relevant actors. That's what we'll also try to do today, well, at least around this webinar. Then develop also skills and methods for developing research infrastructure and living labs. Prepare also funders, and hopefully not only prepare them, that they will give us also more funds in the future for increased well, funding of different agroecology projects or research or other projects. Then improve human and social capital. Improve also the capacity to tailor policy interventions to specific situations. And the last objective is to well, develop medium and long-term research, innovation projects and initiatives. Next, please. And this is, so our project Agroecology4EU is inside the idea to develop a European partnership in agroecology, living labs and research infrastructure. So this initiative, which is piloted by the EU. So it started already in 2020 with some webinars. And there were these 2 projects funded which should support the building of this partnership. So we have our sister project already and our project Agroecology4EU. So to contribute, pilot and build capacities and other things which I mentioned. And in parallel, there is the SCAR Agroecology Group and other stakeholders as well to create this or co-create this partnership. There will be this fall, next year, it will be included the partnership in a call, and then one consortium will then need to manage the partnership, and the start is foreseen for 2024. So we're on a good way now also towards the this partnership. Next slide, please. Yes, and so the general frame of the mapping in agroecology, I will hand over the word to Baptiste, which will tell you in a few slides a little bit the big picture, and then we come to Italy and France. Well, no, France, not France today. Today it's Greece and Italy. Sorry.
Indeed. So hi everyone, my name is Baptiste Gras. So I'm working also at ISARA, doing the coordination of the project with Alex. So before having the presentation of the results of the mapping in Italy and Greece, we just wanted to share some few elements about the methodology of the mapping. So first, the overall goal of the mapping is really to study the development of agroecology in different European countries. The work that we are doing with different mappers is not aiming to be exhaustive, but rather illustrative of the development of agroecology in different countries. So to start this work, we have, of course, read and see the already existing literature that already document a bit the development of agroecology through its different form in different country. And you need to, in order to understand, I think, better the presentation that you will have, to have three elements in mind regarding our methodology. The first one is in this slide is the fact that we categorize every information that we collect regarding existing initiatives, regarding the development of agroecology according to what we call pillars. So historically, there is three, let's say, classical pillars that are recognized regarding agroecology, which is the fact that agroecology could be a movement, a practice, or seen as a science and research. And we added to these three classical pillars two linked mainly to the dynamic at the European level. So the first one is living lab, and the second one is training and education. Also, for the last one, linked to the fact that not every training and education initiatives are linked to the academic world. So most of the information and the data that you will see will be organized according to this five pillars that really build the frame of our mapping. The second and third elements that you need to have in mind is that we will speak along the presentation about what we call key informants, which are basically national experts related with an expertise related to one or several pillars that we interview or that the mappers interviewed. And the second key notion is the fact that we'll speak about initiatives that are, as you will see during the presentation, projects of very different nature, led by formal or even informal organization, linked, of course, to agroecology. So that's the three notions you need to have in mind maybe before the presentation of the results in Italy and Greece. And last thing we wanted to share with you, so some last element about the methodology. So the methodology is divided in three main steps. So as I said, the first one was the definition of our methodological approach at the project scale. And then we implemented based on this methodology, the mapping, thanks to a network of mappers with an analysis at the country level and an analysis of different initiatives linked to agroecology that led to the production of a country report per country that will be at the end disseminated to everyone interested by our work, and that also lead to the different dissemination activity, including, for instance, this webinar. So just to provide you a quick idea about the importance of the mapping, we try to do it in 23 countries. For the month, we have results and available data in 14 countries, involving around 27 mappers, so meaning that it's persons that work at the country level and implementing and doing really the mapping activity. And just to show that also in terms of location, you have here in yellow the different countries that are under mapping, with countries where the mapping is already finalized and countries where the mapping is still ongoing. Last thing, just to provide you an idea, so we interviewed so far more than 100 key informants in 14 countries. Here you have just the percentage of key informants per pillar. So you can see that most key informants were linked to the movement, practice, science and research and training and education pillars in terms of expertise. And if we do the same for the initiatives, so the different initiatives we document for the month more than 118 initiatives, with for most of them are linked to the pillar practice, movement and training and education. So this was just to provide you a very brief overview of what we call the mapping at the project level. And now I will leave the floor to Vasilis, which will present you the mapping as lead for Greece.
All right, thank you, Baptiste. So it's Vasilis Gisakis, I'm from Greece. I participate in the project currently through the organization Olgo Dimitra, which is the National Agricultural Research Foundation of Greece. So I'm going to present very briefly the first results of mapping in Greece as it took place the last, let's say, 15 months to 1 year and a half. It's a collective work that was done with a group of mappers, as Baptiste already indicated. Most of them were also part of the Greek Agroecological Network. So I would like to thank also from this step Panagiotis Papadopoulos, Vaso Yatzidou, Athina Fragadaki for being part of this process. The way I'm going to present the results of mapping in Greece will follow the structure that is already presented by Baptiste. I will follow the 5 pillars already indicated. So please, Baptiste, next slide. We talk about the pillar of education training, living lab, movement, practice, and science. So you can see an indicative map where the different initiatives of agroecology were identified and mapped throughout Greece. So we talk about 4 initiatives in terms of education training, another 3 living labs, 5 in the movement pillar, another 2 in the practice, and another 1 in science. Of course, I'm not going to present all the different initiatives that were mapped. And I should also stress what Baptiste already said, that this list is not exhaustive, but rather representative of the, let's say, main initiatives of this involved or related to agroecology. So, next slide, please. Before going to present the different initiatives, I would like to give a context of agroecology in Greece in very, very few words. But as maybe you already know from other countries or previous presentations, that the term of agroecology is actually used only in the very, very recent years. And also by certain stakeholders like farmers, but mostly, let's say, scientists or even civil society members. But the last years, I would say that it slowly gains recognition and it gains a larger momentum among these different stakeholders. The other things that should be stressed is that agroecology is it's totally related with the development of the so-called ecological or organic farming concept in Greece. And it has many roots in the, let's say, the environmental movement of the 80s and how it has been developed the last decades. Of course, at policy level, and the level of policymakers, the concept is rather not known, absent, although we have done some efforts to present in front of policymakers like previous former ministers of agriculture on the concept, etc. And for the academic sector, it's mostly the terms that mostly prevail are the terms of, let's say, organic farming or sustainable agriculture. So next slide. I will start with the pillar of education and training. And I will start with a maybe rather interesting fact that although, as I said, in the academic sector, we talk most about organic farming and sustainable agriculture, since, let's say, 3 decades ago, from 1998 to 2007, there has been a 4-year bachelor degree, a curriculum, in the University of Ioannina, which is the north and west part of Greece, which was actually about applied agroecology. The sad fact about it is that it has been ended because there was not much interest of students participating in this. But it's something, maybe a question mark here that maybe also somebody else could answer. Maybe it was one of the first, if not the first one, curriculum on agroecology in the European Union. I don't know, Alexander, if you have another opinion on this. Anyhow, the last 20, almost 18 to 20 years, we do have other bachelor or master of science curricula on organic farming or sustainable agriculture, which are prioritized by many agricultural universities. And this topic, the subject of agroecology, is frequently included as an individual course in the study programs of several universities. Besides that, there are also some seminars or trainings, non-formal training or informal training, but by NGOs or some other initiatives like Group of Farmers. And I mentioned here the Ecological Agriculture School that was held the last years by organic farmers in the Athens region, in Attiki region, which is also an interesting fact. Next slide, please. I would just also would like to present that a brief list of courses at bachelor and master level related to agroecology in Greece. You will see that in places like in Crete, there are two courses. There are also a master degree, which is actually related to agroecology. Also in the University of Ioannina, there is still a course on agroecology, also in the University of Peloponnese. Next slide. So, within this education and training pillar, I would like to present briefly two representative initiatives. One of this is one of the Mediterranean Agronomic Institute of Chania. It's part of the CHEAM network, an intergovernmental organization that has institutes in 4 different Mediterranean countries: Greece, Italy, France, and Spain. So there is a sustainable agriculture department and the corresponding Master of Science program, which provides theoretical and practical background on sustainable agriculture and sport, but largely integrates many, let's say, basic elements of agroecology like ecosystem management, agroecosystem management, organic farming approaches, agroforestry, regenerative farming, agrobiodiversity management, etc. Next slide. Still in Crete, in the island of Crete, I would like also to present another initiative that was mapped. It's the so-called Crete Culinary Sanctuaries, which is actually an educational network, accredited educational program provided mostly to students and teachers or even journalists from different educational institutions. And it has a different kind of programs. Like one of these representatives, the 5-day program on several topics like organic, sustainable agriculture, botany, cuisine, or even history and culture. The interesting thing here is that it's like it's interdisciplinary program that mixes both agriculture, agroecology issues with other issues like gastronomy, Mediterranean diet, or even sustainable tourism. So it could be here like covering all many different aspects of agroecology, not only in terms of agriculture, but also social, economic aspects. So next slide, please. I move quick forward to the next pillar, which is about the living labs. It was briefly presented and mentioned before. Living labs is a concept that is not very, very familiar to many even strictly related stakeholders with even education or agriculture, etc. So I find out that sometimes even initiatives that they function like living lab, they were not aware of their role. So this is a concept that's not familiar. Maybe some academics that they are very strictly related with EU level project processes know about it, and we find out that there were some initiatives that they do fulfill the description of a living lab. That means that they promote synergies and co-creation of knowledge, as well as co-design, and they do hold transdisciplinary activities and real-life implementation of results. So next slide, please. One of representative initiative of which can be defined as a living lab is the so-called Southern Lights, which is actually a non-profit organization being active the last, let's say, 5 to 6 years. It is located in the southern part of Peloponnese, in the Laconia area, which actually what it does, it promotes so-called regenerative practices, agroforestry practices, as well as different alternative consuming and organizational structures. It promotes several concepts which are really strictly related with agroecology, like permaculture, agroforestry, as I said, regenerative farming. And the interesting thing is that it holds many, as I said, let's say processes of co-creation to develop innovation or even research through collaboration with many stakeholders, besides farmers, also with scientists or even campaigners, civil society movements, etc. Next slide, please. So talking about movement, the next pillar that was mapped in terms of initiatives were the different movements that could, let's say, we could identify elements of agroecology or things strictly related to agroecology. So as an introduction, I would say that the very early elements, traces of agroecology, can be identified in since the 80s, decades, 3 or 4 decades ago, in the movement of ecological, as it was called, or organic farming. Other elements could be also found in the last 2 decades in civic society movements that were very active in terms of opposing the use and spread of genetically modified organisms, or even being active in the conservation of agricultural genetic diversity. I would say that the very, very clear reference to agroecology happened after the 2016 or even 17, with the formation of the network Agroecology Greece. Next slide, please. So the network, the Greek Agroecological Network, or called Agroecology Greece, was launched 6 years ago, aiming to do what? To network and stakeholders related to agroecology, academics, agronomists, farmers, and general public, and to promote this concept in the Greek audience. So it has several activities like providing information, training, organizing events. Maybe some of you have been already also in the Agroecology Europe forum, where one of the photo on your right side is head, where Agroecology Greece network was present. And of course, it has a very strict relationship with Agroecology Europe. Next slide, please. Another very interesting, movement-related initiative is the Network for Biodiversity and Ecology in Agriculture, the so-called EGILOPS. It's a very well-known and very well-respected, I would say, NGO, active the last almost 20 years, which mostly works on the conservation of the agricultural genetic diversity, local varieties, traditional varieties, ex situ, but also in farm, in situ. It has a very well-structured organization with focal points all over Greece, also organizing many interesting events like the Greek Seed School or the Day of Traditional Varieties, giving free courses and empowering not only the seed saving, the conservation of and use of agricultural genetic diversity, but also the promotion of ecological farming practices. And of course, it participates as an organization in different EU-funded projects and is linked with many other campaigns and initiatives EU-wide or even global-wide. Yes, next slide. So we're going into practice, the agroecology practice. From the mapping processes in Greece, we found out that many so-called agroecological practices were defined by the Greek stakeholders, the farmers, like as mostly as ecological farming, agroforestry, permaculture, even natural farming, which is these are concepts that are also very, let's say, rather frequently used by Greek, let's say, eco farmers. And we talk about practices like the minimal use of soil management, plant protection, fertilization, use of genetic diversity, agricultural genetic diversity, and others. We don't have data on how many of these practices are actually applied and by whom, but we can say that the vast majority of these so-called ecological farming producers, we don't talk just for organic or certified organic farmers, are applied by them. And we would say that these are the pioneers at the Greek, let's say, farming reality, that they were the first to apply these practices in their field and then spread them in the Greek farming community. So next slide, please. So talking about Greek, let's say, farming practices related to agroecology practice initiatives, one very important initiative will be the Organic Farmers Association of Northern Greece, which is a network of farmers established, let's say, 20 years ago. There are many of them, as you can see, 125 organic farmers. They identify themselves as organic farmers. And one of their main task is to organize the open market, the open organic farmer markets, mostly in the area of the city of Thessaloniki. I think that it's at EU level, it's maybe the only one or one of the few, let's say, solely organic farmers market that is, let's say, officially registered by the Greek state. And of course, their aim is to promote organic farming practices. So they participate in conferences and they organize seminars, workshops, and they advocate the right, they lobby for the right of organic farmers in decision-making settings. For example, they have representatives visiting the Ministry of Agriculture for several issues that is very important for the organic farming sector. One of them was the establishment of the open organic farmer markets, which took more than, I would say, 10 or even more years to figure out this and achieve this thing. So next slide, please. All right. So the last pillar, I think, that is it's about the agroecology science. So as I said before, that the research in Greece mostly focuses on what we call, let's say, organic farming, sustainable farming, or even environmentally friendly practices. Actually following the trend in the international, let's say, academic sector related to agriculture. The concept of agroecology is not broadly known or even used by the Greek scientific community, except, I would say, certain pioneer academic members of the Greek academia. And something is that we don't really actually have a department or research which is strictly devoted to agroecology. Nevertheless, there are research institutes or even universities which are devote part of their, even a great part of their activities on working on sustainable, real sustainable food systems with agroecology. So next slide. Next slide, please. Yes, so one example I would like to present is the one of the Institute of Olive Tree Subtropical Plants and Viticulture, which is part of the greater organization of Agroecology Europe. It's a very old, of course, institute. Since the last, how many? 50 years or 60 years? 60 years, actually. So, although its focus is mostly on, as you can see, Mediterranean crops, subtropical crops, etc., viticulture, it was one of the first that had integrated a unit focusing on the so-called ecological production system, so the sustainable rural development, and implemented many interesting projects related to agroecology. And of course, this is something that will be continued. One interesting thing about Agroecology is because it's the National Agricultural Research Institute is that it has direct communication with farmers, direct interaction with farmers, both in terms of research, applied research, also training. So it gives the opportunity actually to promote the concept of agroecology directly to the main stakeholders for agroecology, that is the farmers. So I will be concluding here. So next slide. So concluding, seeing some future perspectives, we saw that already from the mapping process that there is a low, but actually increasing recognition of the agroecological concept by Greek stakeholders. Some initiatives have already started adapting the agroecological framework, not only practically, but also verbally. I mean, using actually the word agroecology, calling their practices, their approach, agroecological one. So we also expect that academic entities working on agroecological approaches will increase the next years, and this can be facilitated by frameworks and support by the EU research programs, like maybe Horizon Europe. There are practices already applied that, as we already saw, they are called ecological or given other words, but they are not perceived to be agroecological, although they actually are. And one main gap that was identified is what was missing actually from these stakeholders. I will say that most important is about farmers. It's to have more support in terms of education and training. Of course, combined with the support, with the horizontal support of research and educational frameworks at formal or even non-formal level. So I'm closing here my presentation. I would like to repeat that many of these initiatives found were already known to us, but it was a nice opportunity for us to realize how important work is done by all those people, mostly of them related to farming sector, farmers, which are actually working in, let's call it idealistic way approach. They don't do this for money, they do it because they have an ideology that they support it. So I'm open, of course, to questions. I would like to thank you for your time, and we can talk after the presentation of the Italian partners. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasilis. So we will now go immediately before having at the end questions for related to both countries. We'll go to Italy, and I don't know if Stella starts or Angelica, but both will present about the results from the mapping in Italy.
Yes, I can start, and Stella's gonna follow. So nice to see you all here, like welcome. I can see also that some people that were actually involved in the mapping are here. So please, if you have anything to say also later, you can say it. Can you go next slide? Thank you. So the case of Italy was a bit different from the other European, not for the mapping per se, but for the people and the organization involved in the mapping process. Okay. So because there was a collaboration together with a project called Opera 19, founded by Cariplo, which is a foundation, and led by AIDA, which is the Italian agroecological association. And even more, we had also collaboration with the Limburg Research Center, which is a center in South Tyrol, and a collaboration also with an NGO called Casa Congo, or Azika has like names. I can't remember what's the right one now. And Lucas Wurzel, which is a photographer, which is like a researcher and photographer that works for this organization, went actually around Italy to meet some of the initiatives and to take some pictures. And next slide, please. So thanks to this, let's say, more fundings that we received from this Italian project, we could have like a big group of mappers, and specifically like 2 in the north, 2 in the south, and 2 in the center of Italy. So focusing on these areas. And I was coordinating the group of mappers. And in the north, there was Stella Bechini, which is today here also to present part of the presentation. Andrea Bianchi. In the south, there were like Paola Cassiano and Rolando Bellardoni, which are also here present. So later, maybe you can tell something. And Davide Primucci and Mattias Lorimer in the center. Also, Davide, I can see him here. Next slide. And we also could include more young collaborators, which was really nice, like Alice Fassò from the group of the University of Gastronomic Science of Pollenzo. Lucas, which I already mentioned, the photographer. And then there was a team of young researchers from the Limburg Research Center, which carried like a very local mapping in South Tyrol. And Tommaso Gaifani that supervised a bit the project, and he's part of the board of AIDA. Next slide. Okay, so we were a big group, so we managed to map 20 initiatives in total. As Vasilis said also for Greece, this is not an exhaustive list. But in particular, we called a map like 5 initiatives as education and training, 3 as movement, 5 as practice, 4 as science, and 3 as living lab. Next slide. Yeah, well, can you go back, sorry, on the map a moment? No, okay, thank you, sorry. Yeah, as you can see, we tried also to distribute it a bit around all Italy, thanks to the fact also that we had like groups of mappers focusing on different areas. And also, like now, next slide. Yes, and also it's important to say, and I think Baptiste also said it at the beginning, that the pillar where the initiatives were assigned is not the only pillar that these initiatives entails. Like, of course, an initiative can do education and training, but can also be very focusing on practice or movement. So we try to categorize them, but the initiatives have more than one pillar. So this is a graph that represents, like, that shows more or less how many of these pillars were covered by these initiatives. And we can see there was much more practice and much less living lab. And we'll see this why later. Next slide. Okay, I'll start with the first pillar, which is the education and training, and particularly focusing on the academia level. So agroecology still hasn't been integrated in the overall bachelor and master degree. There are some universities like the University of Florence, the University of Reggio Calabria, Padua, University of Milan that they are creating some courses, but are really like unique and small examples, and often carried like often there is like one professor behind it, and there is not so much support from the entire institution, let's say. We have a very nice example since 2020 on the Master in Agroecology and Food Sovereignty at the University of Gastronomic Science of Colenso. And we have also a PhD programs at the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, which is in Tuscany, and also the University of Bologna has organized a summer school on agroecology. Next slide. So maybe I'm gonna try to move a bit faster because I mean there is a lot to say. Of course, like we have a longer report, and please, like later we can discuss. We can ask questions. We can go back to the slides. I have also the report here open, so don't worry. And outside the academic world, instead, we have some examples of initiatives dealing with education and professional technical formation. For example, we have the Experimental Itinerant School of Organic Agriculture, the NGO DFL, Scuola Campesina, and other. But there is no like official and structured course for farmers and agronomists. So there is also a lack of a specific figure that is like doing this agroecological formation for farmers. Next. Yeah, here I present one of the examples from the academia level, which is the Master in Agroecology and Food Sovereignty that I mentioned before, that was launched in 2020. And we have here Paola Migliorini, so if you have a specific question, we can also ask her. And the purpose is to educate the next generation of agroecologists with some knowledge and skills that are transdisciplinary, and also make them like kind of facilitators in the agri-food system. So they really use this action-oriented and participatory experimental learning approach, which is a way of teaching that is based very much on action and less on normal type of lectures. Next slide. Yeah, and an example instead of the outside the academia is the Itinerant Experimental School of Organic Agriculture. It was launched in 2006 and is very interesting because indeed it's not institutional, but it's like this group of agronomists and farmers that they got together and they teach farmers and people that want to become farmers, also like new rural people. And all the trainings are very much on the field, and there's really a lot of exchange and continuity also of communication and exchange of information also later. The main aim is to provide training and management in these medium-sized, multifunctional, organically managed farms. And this is, you can see also the small map is in the north. I don't know if you can recognize if you're familiar, some of you with Italy, is in Padua, Venezia, in the north. Next one. Okay, I don't know if Stella, we didn't decide when you're gonna go. If you want, you can go with the living lab, and then maybe we can, if you need, we can exchange.
Thank you, Angelica.
Participatory presentation.
Okay, so also for Italy, living lab is not a well-known concept. It's quite new, and it was not also easy to find initiatives that call themselves agroecology living lab. We mostly found them in international projects such as AgroMix or AgroLink, EU funded projects. And like then the example we will see in the next slide, most of them, maybe they don't really label themselves living lab. Yep, you can stay on the Rete Semirurali, which is an initiative we mapped, very interesting. It really embraces also other pillars of agroecology, but we decided to stress here the method of working, which is based on co-creation of knowledge, and it's really the facilitation also of the exchange of knowledge, basically mostly based focused on agrobiodiversity and genetic resources. Rete Semirurali is a second level association, so it's really is not private members are not in, but other associations from all over Italy are members, and they participate in many projects related to this topic. Next slide. Yes, so about the movement, also is quite heterogeneous regarding the topics and the components. We found that many associations, many initiatives deals with agroecology in working maybe on a specific components such as food sovereignty, social solidarity economy, farmers autonomy, and environmental biodiversity conservation, organic farming. Often we found also that the movements maybe are working quite in some separate ways, but we have also seen that for some important topic, for instance, the CAP reform and process, they had a coalition called Cambiamo l'Agricoltura, Let's Change Agriculture, where different Italian organizations got together with the aim to lobby and influence the Italian government on the topic of organic farming and agroecology. Next slide. So some examples we have seen in they are present in all over Italy. Fa la Cosa Giusta in Sicily, for instance. The Slow Food Network is present also in every region of Italy, and also Associazione Rurale Italiana, Associazione Italiana Agricoltura Biologica for organic farming, and also the example of biodistricts. So other organization initiatives we mapped are related to, sorry, to access to land, to participatory guarantee systems and farmer markets, such as the Genuino Clandestino network. And many examples in Bologna, in Florence, and in Rome that are related to these, that are part of this network. Some also movements are dealing with social issues such as the exploitation in a good way of migrant workers and the recovery and valorization of assets from the mafia or other criminal organizations in Italy. And also an initiative which is called Azione Terra is working in is working together in the international cooperation side, so in other countries, mainly in West Africa. And so maybe some of these initiatives do not necessarily consider themselves agroecological, but they or feel represented by one agroecological movement, but they are part of all this big picture. Next slide. Angelica, can you help me, please?
Yes, here we have the example of Terra, which is in Rome, and it's an association of farmers and artisans. So there are 40 producer members, and the idea is to organize this market, as you can see from the picture. Actually, I never mentioned the picture, but you can see also there is written beneath. And the initiative started in Rome, but then doesn't operate only in Rome. It started also to spread on all the areas around, and it became regional, let's say. And they use also a participatory guarantee system that, if you know, is when all the producers, they don't have the organic certification or any type of organization, but they certificate each other based also on the relationship with the consumers. Next slide. Practice. Practice is the last pillar, I think, yes. And so we interviewed, actually, I didn't say at the beginning, we interviewed 15 key informants at the beginning. So following the methodology that is said. And the practices that were most mentioned was, like, for example, the use of long crop rotation. These are the ecological practices that we think are most used in Italy, but as also Vasilis said, also in Italy we don't have we don't have a research doing saying really all the numbers of practices that were applied. But this is some information, some practices mentioned by the key informants, like water saving irrigation, creation of grass and flowers, strips, hedges, use of mulch, and soil tillage reduction. And there is the impression, that practices that were traditionally used are being rediscovered. So, for example, conservation of local varieties. We saw also the example of Rete Semirurali, which is really doing this all around Italy. Soil fertility improvement, landscape conservation, terracing, and agroforestry as well. More hectares are being certified as organic or biodynamic. So there is a trend that is really, this is showed because there are studies about that. And then there are also, for sure, the hidden agroecology, which is everything that is not institutionalized. Next one.
I can go, Angelica, if you want.
Go.
Sorry. So we have seen that, of course, the morphological environments of Italy is very different and heterogeneous. So we have really intensive cultivation systems, such as horticulture, but also extensive one. And so the adoption of practices is based also on these characteristics. And for instance, in more hilly and mountainous areas, agroecological practices may be more adopted, but also agroecology in terms also of cooperation between stakeholders and farmers is seen also as really a driver of valorization and development for these marginalized territories. We have seen also then when there is let's say, a rediscovery of valorization, innovation of practices, this often also stimulates the valorization of the entire value chain. So we start from the agrobiodiversity in cereals, and we move also to the other steps of the value chain. For instance, innovation in practices in bakers and millers and bakers arriving to the consumers, citizens consumers. Also, this was noticed also by the key informants. The traditional production methods are also part, let's say, of an aesthetic value and the strengthening of touristic potential in some, for instance, for some of these marginalized areas in the territories of Italy. Next slide. Okay, so this is an example of an initiative in Sicily, Le Galline Felici, Happy Hands. It's a consortium of producers that was founded in 2008. Some of the agroecological practices that are present in the producers' fields are the preservation, valorization of biodiversity and the enhancing of biodiversity in orchards and cultivated biodiversity, and but also the coexistence of cultivated areas and wooden forestry areas, permanent meadows, also the association of crops, and the presence of flower strips for impollination services. So the most important products of this consortium is cereals, vegetables, fruits, olive oil, and also a part of fishing products transformation. The numbers are there are around 40 farms and 40 external suppliers in this consortium. So is also this initiative is also part of other projects which deals with environmental protection, reforestation, and the fighting the desertification and climate change impacts in Sicily. Next slide. So going to the last pillar, the science pillar, we have seen also from the first talk of Angelica that agroecology is not yet integrated in the university research as a whole, and a more horizontal agroecology research is still limited. We have but we have an example in the next slide from if you can go on, Battista. Yeah, from the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies in Pisa. There is the agroecology group, which is the main goal is to foster research related to the role of functional biodiversity and the introduction on valorization of agroecological practices in farms. So the main topics are landscape agronomy, agroecology, and functional biodiversity. The actors which are involved are from the academic side, technicians, PhD students, technologists, research associates, scholarship holders, and also other profiles, of course, full professor. So it's a 10-unit research group, which is integrated in the agronomical field laboratory called Land Lab. So the research group really tries to collaborate with farmers in a way to foster this functional biodiversity into the farms and in their territory. So next slide, we can move to the conclusion. So it's we have seen that agroecology, particular agroecological practices, are present, but they are still not. They're present in a heterogeneous way, let's say, across territories and the areas of agricultural productions. It's agroecology from the movement side is, let's say, it's having momentum of ferment, taken into account also the diversity of the initiatives that we have mapped. Sometimes it might be challenging because the concept of agroecology is not really well known or interpreted in the same way by the initiatives. We have seen also that there is a necessity to increase the ability of networking and to have a transdisciplinary also research programs that involves many stakeholders in this field, and also which also involve youth from the science and research side, but also from the field side. So if you want, I don't know, Angelica or Paola or the others to have other few words of conclusion about the mapping, which is still it can be infinite.
Thank you very much, Stella, and also Angelica. So I think we can now move to the questions. So either for Italy or for Greece, it can be also mixed, so there is no specific order. So just tell us to which presentation or which country you specifically asked the question. There were already some questions in the chat, so you might more easily also just take the microphone and speak and show yourself also. Then we all have more this direct connection and not just searching in the chat, because some of the things I saw in the chat. So now we have still 30 minutes left, so that's good, sufficient time to discuss a little bit and exchange. So who wants to start? I see Paola is ready also to say something.
I just wanted to let's say, there was an interesting question about the definition of the living lab and the certification of them. Let's say in general, in the mapping, of course, Alex, you can integrate. Let's say we basically we didn't mapped only the one that are officially certified. We basically try to understood from the bottom-up approach what is self-defined as a living lab. So any somehow initiative, as I wrote in the chat, that correspond to the, in general, to a definition that is found in literature, with an innovation and research focus, but that is very horizontal, very participatory, with the concept of creativity, and of course with a specific focus on agroecology. We have included as agroecological living lab in a very dynamic way. So there is not an official recognition in terms of certification.
Thanks for this clarification. So it's, as you saw, these living labs are not naming themselves living labs, but the mappers and we think some of them could be called agroecological living labs. And this is a general problem, not only for these initiatives, but for others, that many of them, which were mentioned today, are not speaking directly about agroecology, but that's maybe also the reason why there's much more development needed in agroecology, that these people speak about agroecology, because many of them do already agroecology without knowing or naming it like this. But now, please, other questions? Who wants to be next?
Well, I can go if I...
Okay, Nicole, yes, please.
Hi. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. both from Italy and Greece. I'm from Italy, but I'm doing actually my thesis in Greece right now, in Crete, with Elgo Dimitra. So it was interesting to, hear your presentation, Vasilis. And I was wondering actually, because I'm doing my thesis in Chania with the olive oil lab, olive trees, lab. And it's about agroforestry and olive trees. But I kind of have a sort of question from your perspective, since as far as I've understood, you're working also for Elgo Dimitra, but I don't know from where actually. Because when I first interacted with the center, with my supervisor, I didn't perceive this, well, of course, this awareness about agroecology, but as you mentioned, mainly defining it as sustainable practices more than agroecological ones. And also, like, when I was talking about agroforestry, I felt some limitation in understanding what we were talking about, also for this, designing my experimental design, for example. And so I want you to understand maybe more in depth what you think about that, like about the real awareness when we are talking about this inside maybe of the institute, since you were mentioning that. And also the fact that, for example, and this is maybe a general question, but as you prefer, like sometimes I see there are some projects going on, for example, and there is research about it in theory and practice, because it's applied research. But then, like, in the same fields or in like nearby in other fields of the institute, there are some totally different practices for which the fields are used, and not from the research, let's say, but just for renting or living the land. So I'm wondering, like, how much is really concretely developing these, and not just in terms of projects themselves, Thank you.
Yes, I should answer. I'm happy that you are in the institute. I didn't know you are in Chania. I should say, just for the record, that the institute I presented, as I said, it's part of the Elgo Dimitra. Elgo Dimitra is an umbrella organization, 11 different institutes, hundreds of researchers. The Institute of Olive Tree Subtropical Plants and Viticulture has 4 departments, one in Chania, where you are now located, also in Heraklion, in the other part of Crete, also in Kalamata, where I'm now work as a researcher, and in Lesbos Island, up in the northern Aegean part of Greece, as well as in Athens, in the outskirts of Athens. So the institute has more than 25 researchers. Of course, not all of them are affiliated or directly connected to agroecology. In the department in Chania, there are some projects which are now implemented together with Kalamata, like the one I'm going to show you right now, which is, for example, is a typical example of the Sustain Olive project, which is a typical example of project focusing on the olive tree and implementation of agroecological practices. However, I should say that historically, the department in Heraklion was one of the first that had a unit devoted strictly to ecological production systems, agroecological systems. A colleague of mine, previous colleague, that is now no more working in the institute, now works for the university, because he was also a student of Steve Glisman, one of the pioneers in agroecology. Then he transplanted the concept of agroecology in Crete since 25 years ago. So historically, this is important. And now I feel like I'm taking the torch of this concept now to Kalamata. So next time you will choose, maybe you should choose Kalamata instead of Chania. All right. So of course, there are colleagues that are not really familiar with the concept of agroecology. I mean, out of the 25 researchers, I mean, you cannot really have it. I mean, everybody has its own agenda, its own approach. There are different disciplines, different backgrounds. So of course, it's not obligatory that I will follow agroecology. Yes?
No, this, of course, I didn't imply that. It was more maybe a general question about your perception inside of the institute, since you mentioned the development of it inside of the institute. That's all.
All right. Yeah, a small comment for this, just to conclude, is that yes, in big institutes, such let's say research infrastructures, which are, let's say, formal, official, you cannot you can apply concepts as a researcher. Yes, in the, let's say, research proposal, research projects that you implement, that you develop. It's a very slow process to start interacting with other researchers and, let's say, spread, let's say, another approach that they were not familiar with. Luckily for this institute, there are at least 3 or 4 researchers that have already lots of experience and know what agroecology is. Like maybe Yorgos Koupouris that you work with, right? Yes, because he's also part of the sustainability.
Yeah, he's my supervisor.
Yeah, so but to be honest, nowadays, I mean, now I'm installed in Kalamata. I mean, we already have another 2 projects starting right now, including the Agroecology for Europe. So agroecology will be in the agenda of the institute normally, regularly. Yes.
Thank you so much.
I thank you.
Okay.
I'm available for anything you need, Nicole, for also from the Kalamata one. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Then other questions or comments? Yeah, who wanted to speak?
I think Stefano is raising his hand.
Okay, Stefano.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I see the hand now. Yeah, okay,
Yes.
please.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can.
You? Yes, Stefano Grando from Italy, Italian Ministry of Agriculture and for Food and Forestry Policies. And no, thank you to all the presenters. It was an interesting landscape on the 2 countries. My is a comment, is a question about your impression. I mean, we know that agroecology can have different, let's say, not meanings, but levels. No? There is a vision for which agroecology is more related to farming practices in connection with the ecosystem and then natural processes, but also, according to a broader vision, implying a political view, food sovereignty, which is in itself another concept which is has different understandings now in this moment. You know, it has been enrolled also by the European Union, but in a way which is not always in line with the tradition of food sovereignty. And the same for agroecology bit. So I was wondering, in your mapping experience, when you get in touch with these and you analyzed these experiences, were they, I am thinking in particular at those that you labeled as living labs or practice cases. Because I can imagine that movements, for example, and I know some of them, of course, that you mapped, they have this political dimension. But with regard to the experiences more related to the practice and more engaged in finding new ways of farming and so on, did you find that a strong interest, a strong link between farming practices and the social political dimension, the control over the processes and so on? Or they were more focused on the farming activity in itself, in kind of input substitution and you know, typical farming techniques. Thank you.
Okay, well, who starts? Angelica or Stella, and then we can also ask then the Greek side.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Thank you, Stefano. I would like also to ask if Rolando and David are here, if they want to add something, because yeah, they also, I mean, they were the one doing the interviews with these realities, and probably some of you are referring to. But yes, for sure, like we looked for, like indeed, realities that don't only do input substitution. That was also one of the aim. Because, for example, we didn't just look for organic farms and that was enough, you know. We, for example, Galline Felici, also other practices that we mapped, for example, it's a consumption of a producer that really try to be close to the consumers. They do also some political, let's say, lobbying, I don't know how to call it, but they are in contact with also with the university. So that's why I was saying, like, for us was very important that was not only one single pillar represented by the initiative, but there was like more aspects, and which I think is also what agroecology should be. I don't know if I answer completely. Like,
thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
And from the Greece side, you want to add something, Vasilis?
Well, yeah, I mean, the mapping process was not, I feel that it was not really actually trying to discover, I mean, political aspects, let's say, in these initiatives. However, I feel that they are inherently political in terms of having horizontal structures, non-top-down approaches, yes, co-creation, synergies, that means something. So I would say, yes, maybe in indirect way, they do have a political, let's say, aspects of a point of view, which was not actually the point to discover right now. Yes, I mean, political agroecology is a big issue, but yeah, next project. All right,
Thank you.
Then Evie, please.
Yes, hi, my name is AE4EU. I've actually been working with the Southern Lights over the past few months. I really enjoyed this presentation. Thank you to all of you. I look forward, actually, I have many questions and look forward to, I hope, many other conversations about this topic. I think it's fantastic work. I mean, especially identifying maybe smaller projects that wouldn't necessarily identify together and bringing them sort of under an umbrella, understanding or group for action. So my one question of many that I have, and I have to go through some of the work packages a bit more on objectives, but sort of the synergies, maybe the things you're finding most exciting about what's the results of the project so far. So the mapping, yes, but maybe some, I don't know, infrastructures or relationships, or maybe something to look out for, sort of the next phase of the project that we should be looking out for. This is what I'd love to hear for now. Thank you.
Should I respond now? Okay, good. Yeah, so of course, well, one big thing out of the mapping would be maybe what we try to initiate at the moment within the project and with other stakeholders, creating a network of networks, because it's not that we should create a new thing, but there are so many existing things, and this has been just launched, and it should be enlarged, because you see today also there are new initiatives which I have no knowledge about, or stakeholders which are identified in different countries. And so to build on this step by step, that the people know each other, and well, the stakeholders, not only the people or the networks, and that we create this network of networks, and then put them also more on a virtual space together, which we will call the Knowledge and Learning Exchange Hub, where people can then connect our platform, which still needs to be established, which should see the light next year. So there's a test phase already. So, but this is a slow project, and we don't want to, those which are already involved, does not mean that they are better than others. It's just that also with the mapping, we see things are coming and coming and coming, and more people are coming and stakeholders. So this is doing it step by step, and then try to bring the people together. And it's not then, we don't want to manage that we lead it, but then it's sort of our own dynamic that these people can bring together and learn and enlarge agroecology to scale out agroecology. They're more at the European level, but we are also, I think we have clearly to see it as a process over years finally, because as we saw today, and we saw in other webinars also, that for many, agroecology does not speak so much because so many stakeholders do not know about really or what it is behind, or have their own interpretations also. I see Vasilis wanted to comment on it.
Yeah, because the question of Evie is like a little bit directly connected with my responsibility to inform the Greek stakeholders, the initiators participating, that there is this process that you describe now, Alex, the network of networks. So I should mention that tomorrow there is a meeting of this task on creating this network of networks. I could forward to the email of the Southern Lights to Shaila, okay?
Fantastic.
All right, so maybe one of you could participate. I mean, other initiatives like AE4EU already participate on this, but there is of course, open space and room for other initiatives in Greece. So I will, maybe I will forward right now to the info Southern Light email to Shaila, so you can connect with her. And maybe some of you could participate in this. Yes.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Yes.
That's just one meeting or bringing together tomorrow, which is already enlarged, and there will be this enlargement over the next month. So there is really a lot of possibilities to join in later. But for us, it's sometimes, I mean, us, the whole project, not so easy to identify who would be interested to participate. So we started more about our personal connections and knowledge about well, networks and initiatives or NGOs or whatever. But this needs to be sort of a rolling thing, which then connects other people together. Erika, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see you again, some of you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a specific question about the living labs in the methodology. When you're mapping this, when you are doing this mapping process, how do you approach the living lab topic? I mean, do you ask directly to the person or to the interview if you consider a living lab, or how was this in practice? Can you please explain me a little bit more about this? So this is the first question, more methodological, and the second one is, how was the perception of the people about this living lab concept, if they know it? I mean, I know that the results mostly they are not so familiar with this, but yeah, how was the discussion? I mean, how do you approach this topic of living labs? Thanks.
Who starts answering?
Quickly go
Angelica, please.
Just my perception and my experience. Beside the key informants that were involved in some European projects, all the initiatives we interviewed, they didn't know what a living lab was. So we didn't start saying, okay, we think you are a living lab and that's why we are going to ask you about this. So we were first doing the interview, asking some questions, and then telling them what is a living lab and asking them if they could see themselves in that. But we decided that they were a living lab because we knew already a bit, and after the interview we could confirm it or not. So it happened also that we did an interview with a reality, and then we were like, no, wait, but this is not a living lab actually, because this is missing and this is missing. So then we put it in a different pillar, for example.
Okay. In the case of Greece,
Vasilis is shaking.
How was
No, sorry, maybe I don't have my hand raised yet. No, I just would like to answer a small chat we have with Benjamin Sanchez from Spain. You know him, I guess, talking about living labs in a conference last month of the network of regional governments all over Europe. And he's also much involved in finding living labs all over Europe. I mean, all right, there is a definition for living labs. The maturity level of the cases of the initiative, not only our initiatives, but also other cases, sometimes is not high. It's not fulfilling the description of a living lab. However, I feel that, at least for Greece, but I guess also for Italy, the cases, the initiatives that we describe are having also this network, the annual description, do function as living labs, although they are not accredited. Yes, although maybe it's also not their purpose to be accredited like this. I think here it's not just stick to the formalities if they fulfill the definition, but if they are actually, I want to say, functional on this. Yes, if they do function as a living lab, and they have this co-creation synergies, and also real life implementation of their actions to the, let's say, to the communities. Yes. So yeah, this is my my comment. If we meet a truly living, 100% living lab, maybe we should put it on the glass and say, all right, this is a living lab. Let's put it in the museum. I don't think we'll find one. Maybe this is all over Europe, yes. But I don't know if you have another opinion, different opinion from other countries.
Alex, can I have another question?
Yes.
Maybe not directly related, or maybe yes, is most of the initiatives looks quite very specific, no? So they have a particular development or history. Are you thinking, or how do you consider the possibility of escalate or replicate this type of initiative? Is it feasible in terms in general for agroecology, or is more like a unicorn situations? How do you perceive in the future this? I mean, I can see the use of this mapping is create this network and start to make it bigger and bigger and have more exchange. But in certain point, you also consider the replication or escalation of this type of initiatives, and if it's really feasible or possible, considering this background of the initiatives, that most of them looks like very specific condition and things like that. So how could be the path or the strategies to go into this step, if it's possible, or if you think it's better to leave it as organic development of the network and the people develop their own agroecology and just bring in the support? How is also the perspective or the idea for this?
Yeah, that I would say, because we are sort of a European project, so it's not our objective that we should be the people who ask others to replicate or try to create initiatives which are reproduced elsewhere. It's more we are this getting the people together and this co-creation of knowledge and exchange of knowledge that things are then being maybe repeated, or not repeated because it's never a complete repetition, of course, but being inspired by different initiatives and others, and to put them maybe in place elsewhere in Europe. So that would be more, I think, from the project perspective. Then we can also say we have Agroecology Europe, so that would be then more a player inside and outside the project, and say, well, because that's one of the missions of Agroecology Europe, to enlarge and to develop much more agroecology in Europe. So that would be more the role of this NGO then, to bring these people more together and try to initiate really enlargement and repetition or adaptation elsewhere, building on knowledge and existing examples.
Okay, thanks. And last but not least, in that case, I will also invite you, I don't know if you are familiar with this, there is a new project, React for Med. I will share also some links in the chat. It's basically about find these initiatives in the Mediterranean countries, including Italy and Greece, and replicate this type of successful cases, or see how the possibilities are for this replication. So maybe it could be interesting to consider them, these actors, also in this network.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Hi,
yeah,
can I say
Eleni,
something also?
Please.
Yes, hi. Thanks for the presentation. And this is Eleni. I'm at Hania as one of the or two of the speakers before here in Crete. I'm working at the Mediterranean Agronomic Institute of Hania, and I'm glad that I heard Vasilis before mentioning one of the initiatives. One of the initiatives presented was the department, the master program of the sustainable agriculture at Siam Hania. So I'm glad about that. But apart from that, Mai is also participating in a project right now. The project started actually in 2 years ago, and it's Eco Vine Goals project. It's a project led by an Italian partner, Vigel. And it focuses on developing strategies and local action plans for agroecological transition in viticulture areas. Our project has 3 pillars, again, the agroecological practices and landscape analysis and biodiversity analysis, but also participatory governance. And we are basically approaching at the end somehow. We are 6 months left. We're trying to catch up and try to finish a few of our activities because we are somehow lagging behind in coming in contact with stakeholders and communicating our project and our project deliverables. But actually what I wanted to somehow stress and highlight is that it is very difficult to communicate the notion and the practice and this what does agroecology mean. You mentioned before that was a hard. It was hard for you also to communicate it with this with science and people working in research. So it is much more difficult to come in contact with viticulturists, for example, and farmers and discuss about the agroecology. As sometimes this is a bit confusion. There's a confusion among agroecology and organic agriculture and things like that. So that's my my experience. Also, our project foresees something like a networking and the creation of and then exchange of deliverables and information that is produced and developed within this project. So I would like to invite you, the partners of this project, and also other stakeholders that might be interested in you can always take a look in our project, and I will be glad to somehow exchange the knowledge and participate also as a project in the network that you're gonna build in. Last but not least, to be honest, I would like to stress, I think one of the speakers before mentioned that there's a lot of knowledge that is delivered through projects and other initiatives and research. And then nobody, actually, it seems like somebody else starts from the beginning. So it's about time to create a network. It's a very good idea if you can create a network, an open platform, a hub. There's already an agroecology hub, actually, but it's really great if all this information come together, so we don't somehow waste time and resources in doing again the same thing. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Eleni, for your comments, and the proposition to to join things together.
Sorry, just a clarification. Which hub, agroecological hub, are you referring to in your last point?
Yeah, no. I said that there is already an agroecology hub. There is an agroecology knowledge hub, isn't that, for initiated by Agroecology Europe?
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought another one.
Yeah, actually, I am now at the process that we in our project we are trying to find out organizations and research initiatives that already have built a knowledge hub, so we can somehow provide them some kind of deliverables or information if it fits to their project.
Yeah.
So we are now in this stage of our project. That's why basically it would be great if we can probably have a discussion or exchange some information. I can send you some an email. I can email you and see how we can collaborate.
Yeah. Sorry, maybe it's more for you and me, but I will be in your institute in September, so maybe we can exchange. And for developing the agroecology hub within AE4EU, we did a study of the already existing. So we did a preliminary, let's say, analysis of all the database available online, somehow linked to agroecology, even though not directly. But anyhow, we made a study of pros and cons, and so before developing our concept. Anyhow, we can meet in September.
It's the hub itself and the information provided is really valuable because it's used many times. You know, because you can always you need always to refer to some kind of information if you are to discuss about agroecology, because it's not, as already said, it's not something very well known. So you need a reference organization to start with. So it's very useful indeed. Thank you. I will be glad to meet you anyway and discuss it.
Okay, good. I think I might admit a last question or last comment because I see our time is over. And if not, then in the meantime, you have quickly still some time, or you can take time. But just put in the chat another chat where you can put some comments or questions still, that they survive also this this recording later. So feel free to do it if you want. And now okay, he wants to tell us more. So who wanted to do the next step? You, Baptiste?
It was just Paola that added the fact that there is. But Paola, you want to say?
Yeah, I just
some
want
promotion.
To...
Okay, promotional thing for Italy. now?
No, it's not a promotion. It's that inside the Italian mapper and also all the collaborator, we decided also to have, after this first webinar, probably three in-person meeting, because we really would like to animate and create a real networks of agroecologists in Italy. And so for the north of Italy, we already somehow decided that we don't have yet the exact date, but we will have a presentation of the mapping activity and in general of the agroecological movement in Italy in Terra Madre, that is in Torino, between 22nd and 26th of September. And then probably, just probably, there will be another one in Rome for the central of Italy at the end of October or beginning of November. And we are searching for a date for the south of Italy, somewhere, probably in Sicily. So we will keep you updated.
And just the last point was to mention that, as you have seen, I think, during the discussion and the exchange, the mapping is an ongoing process. So there will be other webinar and also maybe other dissemination activities. And also we are planning to release by the end of the year a first volume of an open access book that will summarize the mapping results in different countries, so including maybe Italy and Greece as well. And as Alex was saying, I just share in the chat this link to the website multiscale. If you want to leave us a comment or a question and you did not have the time now to do it, just feel free to use that. And that was it on my side, but otherwise that's more for you if you want to have more information about the project.
Okay, good. Then I thank the presenters for telling us a little bit more about what is going on in Greece and in Italy regarding agroecology. And I hope that we see each other maybe in the next webinar, one then in autumn, with other countries, of course. And thanks also for your participation and also your questions.